This is Mrs. Murphy, back with Romeo and Juliet. You should have already read and listened to the information about the prologue, and now we are beginning Act 1. We're not actually even going to finish the first scene. We're just looking at the first 3 pages or so of Act 1. So we've already taken some notes on the prologue, and we're moving on. Act 1, Scene 1 actually begins with some really minor characters. Samson and Gregory, in the grand scheme of things, in terms of Romeo and Juliet as a play, they're really not that important. But what they do is they help to set the scene for the rest of the play. So the beginning of Act 1, Scene 1 really sets the scene for the play by setting the mood. And the mood that it sets, what it tells us in this part of the play, it tells us that there's going to be some humor. They're going to cut up. They're going to make jokes. It tells us that there's going to be some cowardice, that there are some people who are trying to avoid punishment. They're trying to avoid maybe some painful things, and they really act as cowards over the course of the play. And the beginning of the play also tells us that there's going to be a lot of fighting as well. So it begins with Samson and Gregory, who are two lower class servants, and they work for the house of Montague, and they are armed with swords and bucklers. And Samson says, "Gregory, on my word, will not carry coals." So apparently someone has asked them maybe to carry some coal for heating something. They're lower class, they're servants, that's sort of their job. And Gregory says, "No, for then we should be colliers." Well, this really isn't very funny to us in the 21st century, but it's funny if you know that a collier is a ship that carries coal. And Samson responds, "I mean, and we be in collar, we'll draw." So Samson says, if they make us carry coal like a collier, we will be in collar. And the other day when we talked about the 4 humors, we talked about collar as representing anger. Someone who was said to have choler was said to have an excess of anger. So there's a little pun going on there. And then Gregory replies, "I, while you live, draw your neck out of the collar." So the collar of his shirt. So of course we've got some puns going on in here, some puns that would absolutely rival CNN Student News. It's just not quite as funny when I have to explain them as it would be otherwise, but they're definitely making some jokes with wordplay, which again, back to Renaissance England, wordplay is really important. Any kind of cleverness that you can demonstrate with your use of words, that was really highly valued in that society. So Samson says, "I strike quickly being moved." And Gregory replies, "But thou art not quickly moved to strike." So Samson's basically saying, yeah, I'm going to cut somebody here if I get angry. And Gregory says, "But you're not." So Samson is a bit of a coward, and this is something we're going to see throughout the scene. Samson says, "A dog of the house of Montague moves me," because he has just laid eyes on some Montagues who are coming his way. And that is something that would move a Capulet to anger, because of course the two families are feuding, and even though these aren't actually Capulets, they're employed by the Capulets, and you know what, this feud has extended down into their servants. So Gregory replies, "To move is to stir, and to be valiant is to stand. Therefore if thou art moved, thou runnest away." So he's using some really kind of funky logic here to say, hey, if you move, you're a coward. So Samson replies, "A dog of that house shall move me to stand. I will take the wall for any man or maid of Montague's." And Gregory replies, "That shows thee a weak slave, for the weakest goes to the wall," because in this time, going to the wall or standing at a wall was considered a punishment. Samson replies, "True, and therefore women, being the weaker vessels," okay, Everybody say it. Oh, you guys! Women aren't the weaker vessels, but, you know, they are in this time period. So he says, and therefore women, being the weaker vessels, are ever thrust to the wall. Therefore, I will push Montague's men from the wall and thrust his maids to the wall. And Gregory replies, the quarrel is between our masters and us, their men. Again, that the servants have been drawn into this argument. Samson replies, 'tis all one. I will show myself a tyrant. When I have fought with the men, I will be cruel with the maids and cut off their heads. The heads of the maids, says Gregory, and Samson replies, aye, the heads of the maids, or their maiden heads. Take it in what sense thou wilt. Now, their maiden heads actually refers to their virginity. So when Samson says he's going to take their maiden heads, or he says, well, if you want to interpret it that way, you know, it's unclear here whether he's talking about something that's consensual or not. This is really kind of some rowdy stuff. So they're making jokes, but it sounds like they're making jokes about sexual aggression, which is really obviously not that funny. But that's what's going on here. So Gregory says they must take it in sense that feel it. And Samson replies, me they shall feel while I'm able to stand, and 'tis known I am a pretty piece of flesh. So he thinks that the ladies should all want him because he is just so beautiful. And this line, I am a pretty piece of flesh, that's a pretty famous line. Gregory replies, 'tis well thou art not fish. If thou hadst been poor John. Draw thy tool. Here comes two of the house of Montagues. So this idea of being fish, you're like, well, yeah, it's a good thing you're not a fish. Okay, what's that mean? Is being opposed to flesh. Flesh could refer to meat. And okay, it's Lent. We're in a Catholic school. We don't eat meat on Fridays. What do we eat instead? Fish. So there were, as we talked about, sumptuary laws during this time period, that people of the lower class were only allowed to eat meat so many times per week, but that did not include fish. They were allowed to eat fish. So fish was not considered the same as flesh or meat. And so Gregory is again making a joke saying, well, it's good that you're not a fish, you're flesh instead. So then come in these other two serving men. And these guys, Abram, and although it doesn't say it in your script, Balthazar is the name of the other, and he doesn't speak in this scene, so that's probably why it's listed in some scripts and not in others. And we can talk more later about why some scripts differ. I'll come back to that at another point. But these other two men enter, and so they are both Montagues. And Samson says, my naked weapon is out. Quarrel, I will back thee. So Samson says, oh, go get him, Gregory. I've got your back. And Gregory says, you've got my back? Yeah, how? You gonna turn your back and run? So Samson's saying, I got your back. Gregory's saying, I don't trust you. I think you're a coward. And that's part of what's going on here. So then Samson says, fear me not. And Gregory says, no, I fear thee. And what he fears is just that Samson is a coward and he's not going to back him up after all. Samson says, let us take the law of our sides. Let them begin. And Gregory says, I will frown as I pass by and let them take it as they list, or as they will, as they want to. So what's going on here is that they don't like these other guys and they want to fight them, but they don't want to start the fight. Because if they start the fight, then they'll get in trouble. But if the other guy started the fight, then it's self-defense. But to get the other guy to start the fight, what do? They have to tease them, they have to taunt them, they have to make them angry enough to strike a blow. Then they can fight back and not get in trouble. So that's what they're trying to do here. So he says, let us take the law of our sides, let them begin. I will frown as I pass by and let them take it as they list. So Gregory's like, oh, I've got a great plan. I'm going to frown at them. And so, Samson doesn't think this is quite the greatest plan. He says, nay, as they dare, I will bite my thumb at them, which is a disgrace to them if they bear it. So biting your thumb in this time period when the play was written meant something fairly similar to flipping the bird today. It sounds kind of random, but so does holding up a certain finger. So in any case, this is a really crude and offensive gesture. So Samson bites his thumb, and Abram replies, I think it's got a slightly different name in your script. It's Abram, yeah, or Abraham. And Abraham replies, do you bite your thumb at us, sir? And Samson says, I bite my thumb. And Abraham says, do you bite your thumb at us, sir? And Samson says to his friend, he says, is the law on my side if I say yes? And Gregory says no. And so Samson says, no, sir. I do not bite my thumb at you, sir, but I do bite my thumb, sir. So he's not going to deny biting his thumb, but he's trying to say, I was biting my thumb, but it wasn't at you. Who else would it be at? We don't know, but he doesn't want to admit to wrongdoing. He doesn't want to get in trouble. Samson is a coward. Gregory says, do you quarrel, sir? And he's addressing Abram when he says this. And Abram says, quarrel, sir? No, sir. Samson says, if you do, sir, I am for you. I serve as good a man as you. And Abram says, no better. And Samson says, well, sir. So this is a little bit of my boss is better than your boss that's going on in this discussion. Then enters Benvolio. Benvolio is good friends with Romeo Montague, and he's going to defend the Montague side of things, if anything. Gregory says, say better, here comes one of my master's kinsmen, because Benvolio is a relative or friend of the Montagues. And Samson says, yes, better, sir. And Abram replies, you lie. And Samson says, draw if you be men, meaning draw your weapon. And Gregory, remember thy swashing blow. So they actually begin to fight on stage. There's a stage fight. And Benvolio comes in and he tells them, part, fools, put up your swords. You know not what you do. You know not what you do. Does that line sound familiar to you? You know not what you do. They know not what they do. Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. Jesus, in the Gospels, the Passion of Christ, being put to death. And he says, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. Those words, this is a reference to the Bible. This is a biblical allusion. Okay? So Benvolio, Christ-like, comes in and tells them, stop your fighting, peace, men. He beats down their swords, and then comes Tybalt. Tybalt is a Capulet, and Tybalt comes in like a storm. He says, what? Art thou drawn amongst these heartless hinds? Turn thee, Benvolio, look upon thy death. And he's talking directly to Benvolio here. Benvolio, you've got your weapon out among these servants. Get ready to fight. Benvolio says, I do but keep the peace. Put up thy sword, or manage to part these men with me. Help me to calm this fight. And Tybalt replies, what? Drawn and talk of peace? You've got your weapon out and you're talking about peace? I don't believe it. Tybalt says, peace. I hate the word as I hate hell, all Montagues, and thee. Have at thee, coward, and they fight. So Tybalt is extremely aggressive. He's really angry as a character. So then some people come in, some additional citizens, these officers come in, and it just goes crazy. Um, Capulet enters in his gown, I guess like his nightgown, like he's been in bed with his wife, Lady Capulet, and he says, what noise is this? Give me my longsword, ho! And Lady Capulet says, a crutch, referring to the sword. She says, why do you call for a sword? And Capulet says, my sword, I say, old Montague is come, and flourishes his blade in spite of me. So Capulet wants to fight. His wife really doesn't want him to fight. She calls his sword a crutch. Enter Montague and Lady Montague, and old Montague says, thou villain Capulet, hold me not, let me go. And so this line, hold me not, let me go, gives us this implication that somebody's holding him back physically. And Lady Montague replies, thou shalt not stir a foot to seek a foe, which of course creates a rhyme there, but also she's telling him, you think you're going to fight? You're not going to fight. And so we get this impression that she's the one who's physically holding him back. So this, right from the start, the men want to fight and their wives just want to stop them. So this is where Prince Aeschylus comes in. And the prince enters and he makes a big entrance and he addresses the people. He says, rebellious subjects, enemies to peace, profaners of this neighbor-stained steel, will they not hear? What ho, you men, you beasts that quench the fire of your pernicious rage with purple fountains issuing from your veins. On pain of torture, from those bloody hands, throw your mistempered weapons to the ground and hear the sentence of your moved prince. 3 civil brawls bred in an airy word by thee, old Capulet and Montague, have thrice disturbed the quiet of our streets, and made Verona's ancient citizens cast by their grave beseeming ornaments to wield old partisans in hands as old, cankered with peace, to part your cankered hate. If ever you disturb our streets again, your lives shall pay the forfeit of the peace. For this time all the rest depart away. You, Capulet, shall go along with me, and Montague, come you this afternoon, to know our further pleasure in this case, to old Freetown our common judgment place. Once more, on pain of death, all men depart. So that word, on pain of death, the prince has actually come to the point where he has to threaten these men with death, with the death penalty, if they don't stop this fighting in the streets. And how many times has he caught them fighting in the streets? 3. 3 times. 3 civil brawls, and have thrice disturbed the quiet. So he comes in kind of like the responsible parent, I guess, in this situation, and he lays down the law. If I catch you guys doing this again, there's gonna be a punishment. And so he lays down the law, and we get the impression that he's going to follow through on it. And so he sends the lower class people away. They sort of go away and part, and he tells Capulet and Montague, I want to talk to you guys one-on-one. Capulet, let's talk right now. Montague, you come by later. We're going to talk this out. We're going to bring an end to all this fighting. So that's just the first 3 pages, about half of scene 1, but that's certainly enough to establish what Romeo and Juliet is going to be about. Again, there are going to be some jokes. There's going to be some wordplay. It's going to be funny from time to time. But there are a lot of cowards in this play, people who don't want to face the music and deal with the difficult parts of life. And there's going to be a lot of fighting as well. And that has clearly been set up in these opening 3 pages. That's certainly enough for today. And looking forward to actually getting to read with you together next time. Thanks a lot for listening. Bye.